Hello everyone, and today we're looking at one of the strangest and most underrated military vehicles of the Second World War. A machine that looked small, simple, and almost harmless, but could go places where many larger trucks simply became useless piles of metal buried in mud or desert sand. This is the Fiat-SPA TL.37, an Italian artillery tractor introduced in 1937 and designed specifically to tow heavy artillery across mountains, rocky roads, deserts, and terrain that ordinary military trucks absolutely hated. And honestly, if you saw one parked in a museum today, you might mistake it for some strange military safari vehicle or utility truck. But once you begin looking deeper into the TL-37, you quickly realize this machine was far more advanced than its appearance suggests. In fact, many historians consider it one of the best wheeled artillery tractors of its era, and even Allied troops who captured these vehicles in North Africa admitted the Italians had created something genuinely impressive. At first glance, the TL-37 doesn't really look revolutionary. The body is compact and boxy, the hood is flat and simple, and the overall silhouette almost resembles a strange mix between a Jeep, a farm tractor, and a light military truck. But underneath that simple bodywork sat one of the most advanced off-road drivetrains of the late 1930s. Unlike many wartime trucks that were basically civilian vehicles painted green and thrown into combat, the TL-37 was engineered specifically for military service from the beginning. The Italian army wanted a vehicle capable of towing artillery pieces weighing several tons while carrying the gun crew, ammunition, tools, and supplies through terrain where ordinary trucks would simply give up. Engineers at SPA, Fiat's military division, answered that request with something genuinely unusual. The TL-37 featured permanent four-wheel drive and, even more impressively, four-wheel steering. Yes, all four wheels turned. And honestly, for the late 1930s, that sounded almost like science fiction technology. That four-wheel steering system gave the TL-37 an incredibly tight turning radius of around 15 feet. And that may not sound dramatic today, but imagine trying to maneuver an artillery tractor towing a heavy cannon through narrow mountain roads, crowded military positions, or rocky desert passes during wartime. Larger vehicles often needed multiple maneuvers just to change direction, while the TL-37 could almost pivot around obstacles like some strange mechanical insect. Soldiers quickly realized how valuable that agility was. In difficult terrain, the ability to position artillery quickly could literally determine whether a unit survived or not. And honestly, the TL-37 looked slightly bizarre while doing it. Watching both the front and rear wheels turn together gave the vehicle a strange, crab-like movement that probably confused anybody seeing it for the first time. Even today, surviving TL-37s still look unusual when maneuvering compared to ordinary military trucks from the same era. Under the hood sat a 4,053 cubic centimeter inline-four gasoline engine known as the Fiat-SPA TL, producing approximately 52 horsepower at around 2,000 revolutions per minute. Today, those numbers sound tiny, especially for a military vehicle, but the TL-37 was never designed for speed. It was built for traction, torque, and reliability. The engine delivered strong pulling power at low RPM, exactly what artillery crews needed when dragging heavy guns through sand, mud, snow, or rough mountain trails. Power was sent through a 4-speed manual transmission paired with a 2-speed transfer case, allowing drivers to select different gear ranges depending on terrain conditions. Top speed was only around 24 miles per hour, which honestly sounds painfully slow today. But for artillery operations during the 1930s and 1940s, mobility mattered far more than outright speed. The vehicle weighed roughly 7,850 pounds, and despite its relatively compact dimensions, it could tow surprisingly heavy artillery pieces across terrain that completely stopped much larger trucks. One of the most interesting things about the TL-37 is how unusual the crew compartment looked compared to many military tractors of the era. Instead of cramped enclosed seating or benches facing inward, the Fiat-SPA used relatively conventional forward-facing seats arranged in open rows behind the driver. And honestly, because of that layout, the vehicle almost looked more like an expedition or safari machine than an artillery tractor. The open body design gave the crew excellent visibility and allowed soldiers to enter or leave the vehicle very quickly during artillery deployment. Combined with the canvas roof and oversized off-road tires, the TL-37 had a surprisingly modern appearance for the late 1930s. In some wartime photographs from North Africa, it honestly looks less like a military vehicle and more like some strange off-road exploration machine designed for crossing deserts and mountains instead of participating in one of the largest wars in human history. And speaking of Africa, this is where the TL-37 truly earned its reputation. During the North African campaign, the desert became a brutal testing ground for military vehicles from every nation involved in the war. Sand destroyed engines, heat-cooked transmissions, and rough terrain shattered suspensions constantly. Many vehicles simply could not survive the conditions. But the TL-37 performed surprisingly well. Its large tires, four-wheel drive system, and excellent maneuverability made it highly effective in desert operations. In fact, Australian soldiers who captured several TL-37s reportedly considered them among the best artillery tractors operating in North Africa at the time. And honestly, that says a lot, because Allied troops usually were not eager to complement enemy equipment during wartime. The compact dimensions also made the vehicle easier to hide behind dunes or rocky terrain compared to larger artillery tractors that stood out much more visibly in open desert environments. Another fascinating detail is that the TL-37 eventually became more than just an artillery tractor. Italian forces even experimented with turning it into an improvised self-propelled gun by mounting the Cannonade 75/27 Modello 11 artillery piece directly onto the rear cargo platform. And honestly, the result looked both impressive and slightly terrifying at the same time. Imagine this relatively small, agile tractor suddenly carrying a full-size field gun mounted behind the crew compartment like some improvised battlefield monster. These makeshift self-propelled gun versions were created mainly because armies constantly searched for ways to improve artillery mobility during wartime. Instead of towing the cannon separately, engineers tried placing the gun directly onto the vehicle itself, allowing faster deployment and repositioning during combat. The recoil forces were enormous for such a compact chassis, but the TL-37 platform proved rugged enough to survive surprisingly harsh battlefield conditions. The success of the TL-37 platform became so important that it later served as the foundation for several other military vehicles. One of the most famous was the Fiat-SPA AS.37, a highly capable desert transport truck developed specifically for operations in North Africa. The AS-37 inherited much of the TL-37's off-road engineering philosophy and became one of the most recognizable Italian desert vehicles of the war. The platform also inspired armored vehicles, such as the Fiat-SPA AS.37 and the armored reconnaissance vehicle Fiat-SPA AS.43, both of which borrowed heavily from the TL-37 chassis and drivetrain concepts. And honestly, once you start looking at all these derivatives together, you realize the TL-37 was far more influential than most people imagine. Military engineers rarely continue developing bad designs into multiple specialized variants. The Italians clearly understood they had created something genuinely effective, flexible, and reliable enough to serve as the basis for entirely new categories of military vehicles. The TL-37 also served far beyond Africa. These machines operated in the Balkans, Eastern Europe, and even on the brutal Russian front, where freezing temperatures destroyed countless military vehicles. Despite relatively modest engine power, the TL-37 gained a reputation for reliability and excellent off-road capability. One reason for that was its balanced engineering philosophy. The vehicle wasn't overloaded with unnecessary complexity, but it also wasn't primitive. Engineers focused carefully on what artillery crews actually needed: maneuverability, traction, simplicity, and durability. And honestly, that practical approach might be why the TL-37 still feels impressive today. It wasn't trying to look futuristic or intimidating. It was designed simply to survive terrible conditions while performing an incredibly difficult job every single day. And there's something strangely charming about seeing such a compact little machine dragging heavy artillery across rough terrain while much larger vehicles struggle to keep moving. Today, surviving Fiat-SPA TL.37 vehicles are extremely rare, and seeing one in person almost feels surreal. It looks smaller than most people expect, yet once you understand the engineering hidden underneath that simple bodywork, you begin realizing how advanced this machine actually was for its era. Four-wheel steering, permanent four-wheel drive, excellent off-road capability, compact dimensions, and impressive reliability made it one of the most interesting military support vehicles of the Second World War. And honestly, despite being over 80 years old, the TL-37 still feels surprisingly modern in certain ways. Because even today, military engineers continue trying to solve exactly the same problems: mobility, maneuverability, traction, and reliability in terrible terrain. And if you enjoy discovering forgotten military machines, bizarre engineering experiments, and rare vehicles that quietly changed automotive history without most people ever noticing, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because there are many more unbelievable automotive stories waiting ahead.